Welcome into the Money Wisdom podcast powered by Johnson Brunetti. My name is Jake Dozer. I'm a certified financial planner here on the team in our Connecticut offices, joined by my colleague, Nick. Will you introduce yourself for the listener, sir?
I sure will. Viewers, listeners, welcome back. We're glad to have you back here on the podcast. I'm Nick Colantuono. I'm a certified financial planner, one of our advisors on the team up here in Massachusetts. We're glad you're all with us. We've got a great episode for you all today, so buckle up.
Nick, this is the real question of the day. Surprise, what is your favorite Thanksgiving food?
It's got to be the stuffing.
Ooh.
I'm a stuffing guy.
I am also a stuffing guy.
Mm-hmm.
A stuffing guy. My
Flavor.
mother-in-law makes, shout out Carol Verardo, my mother-in-law makes the best stuffing I've ever had. It's got sausage in it. It's got mushrooms. It's very good.
Okay.
Yeah. She's next level. I've got a larger size Tupperware than I should admit on recording size of stuffing in my refrigerator right now. So
okay. All the reheats were going around the office today. It was like Thanksgiving 2.0 on Monday morning.
Nothing wrong with that. Mm-hmm. Well, listener, now that you're fully hungry, hopefully you're hungry for some information. No, we have a good question that I think get a lot more than often than people might realize today ahead of us. And it's all around cash. Specifically, The question is, am I holding too much cash in retirement? And that might seem like a trivial question, but there's a question underneath the question that I think people think, well, as I get closer to retirement, I want to become safer. And so the spirit of it is, yes, am I holding too much cash? But how do I become safer if I'm not doing it through cash? That's really the question behind it. So Nick, why don't you hit us off? I mean, do you need to even keep any cash? How important is cash in retirement?
Well, Jake, flexibility is key. And oftentimes, I'd say, on a weekly basis, sometimes multiple times a day, we're getting emails from clients saying, oh, I've got this expense coming up, or, oh, something happened. I need a new car, or, oh, we're taking that trip. And people often have a need for liquidity, right? And there's no better vehicle for liquidity than cash. So cash on hand, just like anything that we do for our clients, cash is a key part of having a diversified portfolio.
Right.
Now you have to ask yourself why exactly you own what you own. And obviously, the conversation is not, should I own Apple stock or should I have cash, right? Those two things serve two totally different purposes.
Right.
So you first have to identify the need and really what you want this money to be doing for you. If you want it to be safe, if you want it to be readily available, if you want it to be there for you when you need it, whenever that may be, whether it's 10 seconds from now or 10 weeks or 10 months from now, cash is a good answer for that problem. But, even though it provides you with liquidity, it could be lacking in some other areas. And I think that's where the question underneath the question ultimately comes from is, well, what are the alternatives, in that world?
So cash is important. We've identified cash flow is important. What is the downside of too much cash? Some of this is bottom shelf, but what's some of the downsides?
Well, you always want to make sure that your money is working as hard for you as you've worked for it. I think that's something I say probably 50 times throughout the day. So any of our clients who are listening, you've probably heard me say that. And you go, oh, there's Nick again. But what I mean by that is if that money is set aside for a future date, one that isn't necessarily, right around the corner, you want that money to be working harder for you than what cash can do right now. And, I realize interest rates are somewhere in the 4% range just for like most standard money market funds. It's all good and well, but you then look at your gas bill or you look at your grocery bill from Thanksgiving and you realize the world we live in is just getting more and more expensive all the time. And although money in cash is safe from the market, it's not safe against inflation. It's not safe against taxes. So there are other considerations that have to be made here. Liquidity is really the big driver for when recommendations to hold cash come into play. It's okay, right. Nick, if I need money, I need to know that it's there when I need it in that exact moment. And that's oftentimes where cash is king, as they say. But as you mentioned, Jake, it can lack in some other areas, and clients just need to be aware of that.
Right. And I think about cash, and we talked about interest rates right now, as of the time of this recording, floating around 4%. Well, that's not nearly as dangerous as when cash in 2019 was floating around 0.04%, so to speak. And so, listener, just understand that, as Nick mentioned before, cash serves a purpose. It should always be a part of your portfolio. There are times when you can have more cash and it's less dangerous because it's paying a good interest rate. There are other times when cash should be as limited as possible and you should be segueing to other safe investments in an effort to fight inflation but still be principal protected. Right? So we're not here demonizing cash. We're saying make sure that you're allowing the cash that you have serve your overarching plan. Right? So is cash bad? No. Don't hear when we talk about keeping too much excess cash as you should not become safer. Just understand you need to use the right tool to become safer. Just like cash, too much cash is bad. Too much in your 401k in the stable value fund, which most of them pay like 2%, which is cash in your 401k. That's also bad, right? Both are safe, which is good. Both don't give a very good rate of return, which is bad, right? So it's not that it's bad. It's just it needs to serve the right purpose at the right time. So let me ask you another question. So we talked about when is cash valuable, the excess cash element. What about, how much cash is the right amount, generally speaking?
Well, the financial planning board typically recommends 6 months of expenses be available in cash, liquid cash. So if your expenses are, I don't know, call it $10,000 a month, even though that's probably on the high end for most of our viewers, psychology from the financial planning board would say you should have about $60,000 in cash, just emergency money. So again, some people might look at that number and say, well, oh, my situation is such where I don't necessarily need all that cash. I've got good cash flow. I'm, cash flow positive. I can afford to have a little less in cash. But then you also need to know that if that money is somewhere else, whether it's in the market where it's fluctuating, where it's going up and down every day, you're then relying on the performance of the market to make sure that money is doing what you need it to do. So yeah, money in the market generally is pretty liquid, but it is not safe. And over the long run, money in the market should do better than cash, but you don't know at the point when you need it what these various accounts are going to be doing. Now, you do know at the point when you need cash, if it's in cash, well, it's not going to be doing that much. So it's a trade-off, right? Security, peace of mind, access to money, liquidity, safety. But as you mentioned, what you're giving up in exchange for all of those benefits, what you're giving up is the growth potential. And that's where, you never want to be overexposed to anything. And oftentimes folks come to us, Jake, as you know, at a point in life where all the money they have is all the money they'll have.
Right.
So a lot of people would like to say, well, if I don't need to take any risk anymore, should I? Why shouldn't I just have all my money in cash? There are conversations we have to have along those lines as well, because although that might be okay for you, you never want to hear about the market going up 20, 25% and you're there completely missing out on it.
Right.
On the flip side, when the market goes the other way, I don't say if, listeners, viewers, I say when the market goes the other way, you need to know that you're not overexposed. So it's really, it's a bit of a touchy subject. And I think you realize this as well, Jake. It's very different for everyone, for every client we meet with. Some folks are just way more conservative. Some folks are way more growth oriented. And, they rely on us to kind of, bring them to the middle there. And it's just, these are just conversations that you have to have. So definitely emergencies come up. You're going to need a new car. You're going to, something is going to happen where you're going to need to get your hands on money. And viewer and listener, if that happened today, do you have a plan for where you're going to go to get that cash? And if the answer is no, well, that's where, again, the Certified Financial Planning Board certainly recommends having about 6 months cash on hand. And that's consistent with our philosophy as a firm as well.
Yeah, I think that's a great general answer, 6 months. If somebody said to me, Jake, I rent an apartment, I'm 25, myself and my significant other both have good jobs, I might say maybe you only need 3 months. Maybe you're the person who has multiple rental properties and you need more like 12 to 18 months because you could have emergencies in multiple pieces of property. Maybe you keep 6 months worth of expenses in the bank just for peace of mind. But in a year from now, you're going to spend 10 grand on a destination wedding you're going to be a visitor to. At which point we're keeping a little bit of extra cash because the market's volatile and you need that money as a lump sum, and it's a larger lump sum. Maybe you need 2 grand in January for a car repair, and 2 grand isn't significant enough to really keep in cash. So we're okay with market volatility. Maybe you're generating enough cash flow from your portfolio that we're taking the dividends from your portfolio and setting them aside to cash to create your consistent income. So when we talk about cash, do not think we're villainizing it. We use it all the time. We just use it with intentionality. And furthermore, it's so important, again, as Nick has mentioned multiple times, talking about inflation. Keep in mind from 1913 to today, which is the length of time inflation has been measured in the United States, inflation averages about 3.3% per year. There are times when it's higher, there's times when it's lower. What that translates to is cash, we're not worried about inflation as long as you're not holding it over long periods of time. But we're thinking about inflation is if you're holding an asset for 2 years or more over time, we need, if you're going to be safe, to get a better rate of return than the rate of inflation. So I think those are good parameters to be thinking about a little bit more pragmatically. Is where is cash serving my purpose? How is this money serving my larger purpose? And that's really all this comes down to. It always starts with, what is my plan? Short term, medium term, long term, how to use this money most effectively, how to invest it. And how do I figure out how I fit into making that plan? If that's a conversation or this type of idea, whether it be about cash, whether it be about safety, stocks, bonds, whatever it may be, if that's something that you're trying to figure out, we have a resource. I'd love to get it in your hands. We have the philosophy of our firm, Johnson Bernetti, effectively distilled into a book. That's an easy read. It's called The Money Map. Joel Johnson, our managing partner, wrote it. If you'd like to get your hands on a copy of that book, we'll send it to you free of charge. So if you text the word MAP, M-A-P, to 800-757-0436, we will send you that Money Map book. And you can start getting a sense of how does my questions fit into the larger financial planning conversation. That information is in the show notes as well. It all comes back to, I always think about these decisions specifically as it pertains to safety versus risk in the market. It's kind of like a rubber band. A rubber band is only effective when it has tension. If you take your rubber band and set it on the desk, it's going to dry out. It's become brittle because it's designed to be used. If you overstretch it, it's going to snap. A rubber band is good when it's being used often. And so similarly, we as a firm, our job is to find the tension between the amount of risk you want to take or the lack thereof and the amount of risk you need in order to make your plan work. And that is related to cash because it's all about safety versus risk to make your lifestyle work. You don't want to be so afraid to use your money that you're sitting in cash paralyzed. You don't want to be so aggressive with your using of money that you run out, right? So all of these, whether it be about cash or about any other investment under the sun, it has to fit into your plan. Well, let's transition a little bit. In the last few minutes of our episode, this is really my favorite part of our episodes. It's a good time. We call it our mailbag minute. It's commonly referred to as a lightning round. We have 3 questions here today that I'm going to pose to Nick, and we're going to rapid fire him. He's going to try in 60 seconds or less to give us an answer. Here we go, Nick. We have a great question first about passing wealth on to future generations. How do my spouse, and this is written in from Susie in Bristol, Connecticut. How do my spouse and I best protect or invest our money to maximize what we pass on to our children and grandchildren?
Oh, well, Susie, that's a great question. There's a lot of layers to it, and I apologize because I'm probably going to take more than a minute on it. When it comes to simply leaving money behind, when people say they want to maximize that, what I interpret that to mean is, how do I make sure that the taxable implications of the money I leave behind to my kids or your grandkids in this case is as little as possible? So there are more efficient buckets of money to be left than others. Unfortunately, what we see as a firm, and this is probably just consistent with the phase of life our clients find themselves in. More often than not, when one of our clients passes away, the majority of money that they're leaving behind tends to be on the retirement side of the fence, the IRAs, the 401ks, money that they have never paid a penny of taxes on in their life. And how does that come to be? Well, it comes to be that if they were to access that money while they were living, they would pay taxes on it. Well, the same is true if you're not living. So any retirement money that gets left behind to kids and grandkids, they're forced to withdraw all of it over a 10-year period following the date of your death. And what that means is they're paying income taxes on it all along the way. So if you want to just maximize the sheer amount of money that gets left behind, well, don't leave taxable or don't leave accounts that you've never paid taxes on before. Leave the brokerage accounts, leave the highly appreciated stocks, leave the real estate, right? Leave cash in the bank. They can inherit that stuff with zero tax implications. So we're always encouraging our clients, spend your retirement money. You've saved it for a reason. One, it's more efficient for you and your tax bracket to be accessing it than it is to leave behind to kids or grandkids. So as far as protecting the money, there's no better thing to protect money from than taxes. So that's a good way to approach that. But as far as investing that money, if you're investing it for future generations, I would take a growth oriented approach. And what that ultimately means is, it's probably not going to be safe money. It's going to be growth oriented money, but where's the market going to be 10, 15, 20 years from now when your kids or grandkids are inheriting it? So there's a lot deeper we can go into this question. And I know I've taken like 3 minutes already. So my apologies.
That's all right. The next question is going to be a quick one.
Sure.
This next question, totally separate subject about RMDs. This person says, I'm turning 72 this year. What is the latest date I must begin withdrawing from my 403B and my tax deferred annuity, which most often is the same thing as a 403B? But
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So it's a great question. So there's been a lot of rule changes there. And that's why I sense a little bit of confusion from the listener who asked this question, because the new rule is now RMDs have to be satisfied within the calendar year that you turn age 73. There are some exceptions, right? If your birthday is, more than halfway through the year, you can in theory delay your first RMD till the next year. But what that ultimately means is that in the next year, you have to take two. So a lot of people don't like the idea of that. But, to answer the question, once you reach age 73, your RMD has to be satisfied by December 31st of that year. So it's got to come out during the year that you reach age 73.
Finally, last but not least, and this is a question we hear so much about as it pertains to Roth IRAs. Should I save my money, my retirement money, in a Roth account so I pay taxes now and not when I retire? Man, this is a loaded one.
The answer is maybe. It all comes down to your income. It all comes down to what tax bracket you're in now, at the point where you could be making the traditional retirement account savings, and in theory getting a deduction for those contributions versus what tax bracket you'll be in retirement when you're taking money out. So it's not necessarily about how the money grows per se, but it's more important to think about how the money goes in and then how the money goes out. And when you're putting money into a Roth, you want to do it when you're in a low tax bracket. When you're taking money out of traditional accounts, you want to do it when you're also in a low tax bracket. And on the flip side of that, if you're putting money in a traditional IRA or a traditional 401k, you want to do that when you're in a high tax bracket so you get the deductions, and vice versa. So it's really a great question. It comes down to the core of making sure that you have a plan that's specific to you, because as well as I do, Jake, you can go online, you can read this article, you can read that article. It's all going to be, just a big mess. There's a lot of information that gets thrown at all you folks. So make sure you have a plan. Make sure you have a clear, contact point to go to get advice that's specific.
With that being said, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that Money Map book. If you'd like to get your hands on that book, we'd be happy to send you a copy. Simply text the word MAP to 800-757-0436. Take a peek at the show notes below to be able to get that info, and reach out would get that resource to you. Today has been another Money Wisdom podcast powered by Johnson Brunetti. We appreciate your support. If this video has been helpful, share it, like it, turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. And otherwise, we'll see you next time on the podcast.
Johnson Brunetti is a marketing name for the businesses of JB Capital and JN Financial. Investment advisory services offered through JB Capital LLC. Insurance products offered through JN Financial LLC.